We are in the presence, ladies and gentlemen, of film podcasting royalty. As I will decree it, I absolutely love talking about movies. I always feel like, you ever talked, and listen, everybody out there listening, have you talked to somebody about movies where you feel like you don't know a goddamn thing when you're done talking to them? I mean, I absolutely love talking movies with the one, the only JD Duran of the InSession Film Podcast. JD!
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I'm glad to be here.
I didn't start recording this one either. There we go. I actually started this one. I did my job. I did good. I did it.
There it is. It's recording.
Before, I don't know what we've even got planned. I don't know what you even want to talk about or whatever the case may be.
Talk about anything.
Oh, what
are you feeling?
That's scary. But before we do, please let the audience out there know, if they're not already familiar with who you are and what you do, let them know a little bit about JD Duran and InSession Film.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words there to open. You can find everything about us at InSessionFilm.com. We have changed things up slightly from the last time we talked. I can't remember. I guess when I was on last year, we had just changed things up. So for a long time, we weren't doing video. We do video now. So this is very exciting. So getting to see your face and talk to you is kind of a new venture for us. So you can find our podcast on YouTube and, of course, on all the audio stuff. But we have a main show that we put out every week. Our reviews now live separately since we're doing the video thing. We just figured it'd be a lot easier if people just wanted to listen to our thoughts on Furiosa or, whatever movie that we've done recently. That kind of lives separately, especially because Brendan and I tend to ramble on a little bit. So those episodes are still, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, where previously everything was on one show. So we'd have a review that was 45 minutes and then there'd be another hour and a half of other stuff. So we've kind of all separated it and made it a little easier to find. But, if you like movies and want to talk movies with us, we'd love to have you join us in that. It's a lot of fun.
If you say Furiosa 3 times, Gerald's going to come in here and attack me. So don't say it again, JD, because he'll come in here.
Yeah, I know how you feel about it. And look, we can't all be right on everything all the time.
All right, I'll take that.
That's a lot of money.
I can have my hair done at the beauty parlor with $100.
I don't understand why that alert is playing for donations that are not $100.
Nick, even if it's $100, that's so fucking long, man. Like, come on.
Get out. Beat it. That was a $50 donation from Mike from Game for a Movie, who was just on here with that whole amazing panel of people. Thank you so much for that $50 donation. Yes. I really appreciate it. God, what do I want to... I mean, you know so much about what's going on in movies, and you know so much about... I mean, I know you have thoughts about literally every kind of movie and anything like that under the sun, but
Here we go.
Stu with a $20 donation says he was robbed by Dan joining late, but still had a blast playing. Thank you so much, Stu. Again, Stu will be eating crickets a little bit later during the live stream for The Cure. You know what I would like to ask you about, because I don't know what you feel about this, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts on it are, is there's been much ado about the theater industry, about the movie theater industry and the state of movie theaters. And I mean, kind of the lack of financial box office success, we'll say, for some movies and things like that. What is it that you think that is not getting audiences to cinemas as much as probably somebody who loves cinema like you do would like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm glad that you bring that up, because we've been talking about this quite extensively on the show over the last few months or so. I ironically posted a clip earlier today on our socials where we talked about this very thing on the last episode.
Wow.
Because you're right. It is such a big talking point. I think it is multifaceted, of course. There's nuance to it. I think part of it is, for one, it's very expensive to get to the theaters. So I have a family of 4. My youngest isn't old enough to really go to the theaters, but if I take my wife and my oldest son to see a movie, we're spending at least $60 easily. And that's just for one trip. And I can't even fathom what the cost is if you have a family of 4 or 5 and you're taking a large group with you to the movies. It's really expensive, and you couple that with general economic issues in our country. I live in Florida, South Florida specifically. It is very expensive to live here, and salaries are not keeping up with that inflation. So, depending on where you live, that just makes it all the more difficult. So, like, the cost of going to the movies is certainly part of it. The introduction of streaming, which isn't going anywhere, is such a big part of it, especially in a post-pandemic world. We were always going to end up here in some way or another. I was thinking pre-pandemic that we would be here maybe by 2030, but the pandemic just sped everything up by 10 or 15 years. And all of a sudden, during that time, the studios wanted to throw everything at us at home for very understandable reasons, but a lot of the habits that consumers associated at that time is still very much applicable now. And what we're seeing is, one, audiences are conditioned to just simply wait it out. If I just, wait a couple of weeks, it's going to hit Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or whatever it is. And that is not only cheaper, I can be comfortable at home, and surround sound systems and TVs, like to put a studio together at your house is much more cost effective now than it ever has been before. Everything's at our fingertips. So I can have a very good experience at home, comparatively to 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that is a convenience that I like. So, I think all of those factors are such a big play in all of this, and we're really seeing the evidence of that when something like The Fall Guy comes out, which is a movie that I think 10 years ago would have made $500 million. But
speaking of making money, oh my goodness gracious, we got a $20 donation in there from the one, the only, my co-host. You love him. We all love him. Gerald Morris, $20 donation. This money is in honor of JD, but also please add to the Furiosa box office total. Okay, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. We're living in a world where, and this might happen with Furiosa. I don't know, but these movies come to streaming, or not really streaming, but VOD, premium VOD, just weeks after. Like, it's not even June yet, and The Fall Guy, which came out at the beginning of the month, is available now on demand. That's wild to me. Absolutely wild to me. And for a long time, or like even before now, I'd say the last couple of years, you really saw this perhaps most prominently with animation because of what Disney had done with Disney Plus. I think it's why animated films, particularly Disney films, have struggled comparatively. Elemental last year eventually did well, but it was a little concerning, to say the least, there at the beginning. And, again, because of all of those factors, people don't necessarily want to get to the theaters as much. And now we're seeing it with all kinds of films, not even just animated films. I mean, Challengers went to premium VOD just a couple of weeks after.
Which is heartbreaking, because that right now, Challengers is movie of the year to me right now. God, yeah, I love that movie. That movie was so good.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Challengers is maybe not a great example because it is good. I agree with you. And, I have my issues with it. I still think it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. A lot of people have it as their favorite films of the year, but it is a Luca Guadagnino film. And I don't think it was ever going to be like a box office draw necessarily.
For sure. Yeah.
But, something like, Furiosa for sure, or The Fall Guy, Apes, which is done okay, not super great, but it's done well enough. Garfield, another animated film that's underperformed. And, I think it's evidence of the economics of our country and how that's shifted in a post-pandemic world. Inflation is out of control, and it's just convenient to watch things at home, and the studios are rewarding us for waiting it out. Why? Like, there's no incentive for me to necessarily go to the theaters other than, people like me, cinephiles and, lovers of the art form, just championing, the theatrical experience. Go see it in theaters. I mean, watching Furiosa in a theater, I would argue, is going to be much more of an impact than watching it at home. But, I also live with 2 kids, and, watching it at home is going to be more of a distracting experience. And depending on where you live, going to the theaters could be challenging in the sense that, is it hard for you to have a good theatrical experience?
Yeah.
Like, some of my friends that live in New York talk about this all the time. Like, people are just, there's no etiquette to going to the theater, and it's really difficult. Thankfully, where I'm at, I'm a little north of Miami, so I don't have to deal with that crowd. I'm a little northwestish of Fort Lauderdale. So the crowd that I have here isn't bad. There's certainly times I have to punch people in the face, but most of the time it's cordial and people understand what's going on.
Here we go.
How many? So just shortlist it. How many people have you just beaten to a pulp at the movie theater? I got to ask. But before you answer, Julio from the Contrarians, a $25 donation, $1 for every point, rounded up. There you go, Julio. Thank you so much. Again, the Contrarians take on Disney on Saturday during the live stream for The Cure. You don't want to miss it. They're going to be up here with the Contrarians corner on all the Disney stuff. Gerald actually said this in the chat, and I want to get you throw this just into the conversation too. I hate to say this, but the cinematic experience isn't as valued in our society anymore, which kind of touches, I think, into some of what you're talking about with the way the some audiences, and I want to talk about my theater experiences that I have for sure, but like, just in terms of like audience etiquette going to theaters, because it's one thing. And the thing that I love the most about it, there's this interesting dichotomy to it, right? Where it's cost prohibitive to go to the theater, but then the audiences that are paying to go to the theater aren't necessarily following the best etiquette to make it a better experience for everybody involved either, which is kind of this weird, it's this weird dichotomy where it just doesn't line up to me mentally,
Yeah. No, all of that adds up. I think you can also couple it with the fact that there's a lot of great TV right now as well that is available via a lot of these streaming platforms. So people might just be drawn to that. I'm obviously in the film world all the time, so I don't have as much time to watch TV, but you hear about these great shows that people really love, they get great reviews, and you see the discourse online. So people are very much drawn to it, and film just doesn't have the kind of imprint in the zeitgeist that it had. And I'm not even going to touch this, but part of it could also be the political landscape of our country as well, which is quite heated. There's very pointed political views about Hollywood that you can find on the street, and that could also play a role. Just people being turned off, a certain sect of the audience anyway. And so all of these things I think start to add up, and then you get to a point where a film like The Fall Guy, which should have made a lot of money, doesn't, or Furiosa doesn't make a lot of money. Now, hopefully these films can have long legs, but like The Fall Guy, I do kind of wonder if it would have had a shelf life that could have had an Elemental type run if the film simply was in theaters for, let's say, 4 or 5 months. But that's just not how it works now. Like, we'll never get an answer to that because the studios freak out and they simply put it on demand.
Yeah,
and
they got to find a way to recoup that budget.
Find a way to recoup.
Yeah, as soon as they possibly can. Which breaks my heart, especially for the Fall Guy, because like when I watched the trailers for it, I mean, I'll be 100% honest with you. I basically watched it because we were reviewing it for the show, because the trailers just made it seem like it was more focused on the rom. As much as I love Gosling, as much as I love Emily Blunt and all that kind of stuff, what that movie really truly was to me was this beautiful love letter to stunt work and to practical effects and that kind of stuff. And just watching it for that, like, I mean, the plot of that movie, like, whatever, you can crumple it up and kind of toss it aside. It doesn't matter as much as just there is such a passion David Leitch puts on that screen for the practical effects and the stunt work that I mean, if you're somebody who loves cinema at all, you love movies at all. And like when I came out of the theater, the first thing I thought was, I was like, why did they market it the way that they did? Why didn't they lean more heavily into the stunt love letter that the stunt work love letter that it kind of is? Because I think even in a lot of senses, I think that people would resonate more with just the respect of the craft. And who doesn't love to see a kick-ass practical action sequence at that? You know, like I really think that plays so much better. I was confused that they leaned so heavily into but I mean, I guess probably they were going for a bigger, like broader appeal with the general audience, I guess you could say, like by leaning into more of the love story kind of aspect of it. But really, that wasn't what the movie was about. No,
I agree. I mean, I think it does a good job of being both things, which is probably why it's a really good draw. Like, for example, my mother-in-law took a group of her friends to go see it. Obviously, they're older than I am, and they loved it. Like they had a great. And this wasn't even a recommendation for me. Like they just simply saw the same marketing that you're talking about and wanted to go see that movie, which I thought was really interesting. That's a demographic they were able to grab. And
that's the Ryan Gosling abs demographic, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe that's part of it for sure. But like, I do think the chemistry between Gosling and Blunt is fantastic.
It is,
and there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of meta qualities to it. And then there's the stunt work and Hollywood aspect that you're talking about. And I think it's a film that I could recommend to everybody. And I think on some level, they're going to enjoy it. Even if they don't love it, I think they'll enjoy it on some level. Like it's an impossible, I say this facetiously, but it's an impossible film to just, hey, like walk out of that experience going, I hated that. Like how? Like, like it's a film that is goofy and silly and fun. It's trying to be those things. It's not self-serious at all. And is a film that I think, years ago would have been a pretty decent hit. But, you know, I don't know. Maybe Gosling just isn't the draw we think he is or could be, you know, because people say a lot of the same things about The Nice Guys, which is a film that did come out 10 years ago.
So good. God, I love that movie.
And is great. But that was a film that also didn't, you know, like kill at the box office either. So,
lamentably.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of this also could just be timing. It could maybe it's a little bit more random. I don't know, you know, because you think of something like Dune earlier in the year, which has done well. I think that's made over $700 million. So
yeah, I think so.
You know, it might just depend on the draw of the film. Like there was a lot of build up to Dune. One thing that we also talked about on the show that has seemingly played at least some role. You know, I think about some of the virality of social media. Like part of what made Barbenheimer what it was last year is the organic grassroots of it all. Like that started not from studios or marketing firms harnessing something we've never seen before. They didn't do anything other than the conventional norms of marketing a movie. Barbenheimer came from the people. It came from social media. And the memes and the jokes and the fun that came from that. And everyone latched on to that. There became this huge curiosity. And then the day came and it was an event. The studios didn't really have much to do with that. They leaned into it a little bit for sure, but that was the culture creating a moment. I think of Dune earlier in the year having a little bit of that as well. Like you see videos of people dressed up and riding sandworms in the lobby of a movie theater, that going viral, and the Dune popcorn bucket and everyone making jokes about that. And
that
so,
bucket, how much box office do you think that bucket, because that bucket had to have drawn a bunch of people to the theater just because they wanted that bucket.
100%. Like it probably was accidental, but it worked gloriously. And then not only the bucket, but then there's like t-shirts and swag. You know, there was a huge viral tweet of a guy just wearing a shirt, "I'm here to fuck the popcorn bucket," or whatever he said.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's, you know, like that's the culture creating a moment. You didn't have that with The Fall Guy or Furiosa. There wasn't a whole lot of viral stuff of people going to the theaters and creating a moment. There was discourse for Furiosa for sure. I mean, if you were on Twitter or Instagram at all, you saw people talking about that film, but it didn't have the same kind of like transcendent moment. And I kind of wonder if that's if maybe we should put some weight into that as well. Which is why, you know, like I could see something like Deadpool, I think will be another film because of social media, but also it's Marvel. That's a film that I think will do well, you know, but anything else that comes out this summer, honestly, I don't know. I have a lot of questions as far as anything else that could be a financial success. You know, like I'm really hoping for Twisters. I think Twisters could have like a Dune-esque kind of virality to it. You know, the Bad Boys franchise has always done well, but in a post-pandemic world, is it going to hit the same? I don't know. This is going to be the first film to come out.
That's the best phrase possible to use about a Will Smith movie. Is it going to hit the same?
Touche. Yeah. You know, or I think about Inside Out. Like I loved Inside Out when it came out, and it was a huge financial success for Pixar at the time. And it might have been their biggest hit financially of the 2010s, or it was very close if it wasn't. Is Inside Out 2 going to follow that same formula, or is it going to become like every other Disney animated film to come out post-pandemic? Will it be Elemental this time around? I don't, like, it's really hard to tell. Like A Quiet Place, I don't think that's going to hit necessarily. Like, I don't know. I have a lot of questions as far as like how the rest of this summer is going to go based off of what we've seen so far. And maybe it's because audiences are looking at the slate here and going, there's really not a whole lot here. And so they're waiting for the fall, maybe. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think it's interesting too, kind of to bring up a film like The Quiet Place, Day One. That's what I was trying to think of the name of it for a second there. But because I know for a fact, and this is my experience, so I want to filter this into the conversation and really get your thoughts about this too. Because when I go to the movies, I go to Regal. I have a Regal. I live in Ithaca in the Finger Lakes, so I have a Regal here, and I have a small art theater that was probably built 40 years ago that has seats that are half the size of me. You know, so I don't get to go there that often unless, like, last year I think I went to see Past Lives there. I went to see Past Lives there because I really had to see that movie, and it was my number one of the year, so it ended up turning out okay. Yeah. But like when I go to the theater, and I don't know how this is for your experience necessarily, but a lot of what I've heard from other people too, and this frustrates me to the point, like when I used to go to the movies, JD, it was I had to be there before the start time of the ticket because I want to see every trailer. I want to have my snacks. I want to have everything I want. But my film viewing has changed to a degree where they now play at my theater. They now play 30 minutes of ads and trailers, and they intermingle them too. So it's not even just Here's the commercials, here's the trailers or whatever. So now I'm grateful that I live in a situation where I only live like I'm less than 5 minutes from my movie theater. I can just jump down the road and I'm right there.
Yeah.
But I don't leave my house until after the posted start time of my movie. I get to the theater, I get in line, I get a water, and then by the time I get into the theater, I've still got 15 minutes of trailers to go. Like, I think it's something to be said. And the older I get, as a person, and this just speaks to me as a person, but like, I don't got time. I don't got time to sit in a theater and have you play the same, because I know I've heard Joey on So Wizard talk about this. I know I've heard other people talk about it too. It's like, how many times have I seen the same trailer for this movie? But that's because when you watch any movie in the theater, you're getting 15 trailers now. It's crazy. It's so much
insane.
time.
No, that is a problem. It is a problem, and it's not just a Regal problem. It's Cinemark, it's AMC, it's all of them. You know, I kind of like, I'm an AMC guy mostly. And AMC A-List is a lifesaver. I absolutely love it.
Same with Regal's, whatever their thing is called. Yep.
Yeah. So, but you know, I will bounce around depending on the time in the movie, and they're all absolutely horrid. It is. It's at least 30 minutes. And again, circling it back to taking my family to see this, is like, if you have kids, it's especially problematic.
No way.
Because
never happened.
Kids have a small attention span as it is, and you add 30 minutes on top of that. You're like, yeah, you're right. You can't show up on time. You can't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't care how many minions you shove in those trailers. Those kids aren't sitting still for a half an hour of trailers.
You can't. Like, if you have kids, you have to show up like 30 minutes after the supposed start time. And then at that point, it's like, what is even the point? Like, what are you playing the trailers for? Because it's not for me. It's not for the parent with the kids that has to miss it, because 30 minutes is too much. Yep. It's way, way too much. Like, I am never there on time. Like, I go by myself a lot of the time.
Same.
And even if I am sitting through trailers, I'm not paying attention to any of them. I have my music on. I'm listening to music in my headphones all the way through. Cause
you want to know how much live stream for The Cure work I did sitting in the movie theater waiting for movies to start? A lot. Exactly. I'll tell you that.
You're doing things like that. Like, I'm half tempted to just bring my computer and just do a bunch of work if I have to sit through them. Cause
honestly,
it's just utter nonsense.
Yeah.
And like, I can't sit there, but if I'm especially taking my kids, like, I can't have him sit through, especially if it's a longer-ish movie. You know, like, I just took him to see the new Apes movie, and I think that's close to 2 hours or more than 2 hours even. I think it's like closer to 220. I can't add remember. 30 minutes. I can't make it a 3-hour experience where he's already going to be in and out of the movie at 220, let alone adding in, like, it's very contradictory to what they're wanting. And I can't fathom that we're alone in that. I'm sure people are missing, like, and it's evident just by paying attention to, like, how the theater fills up, because whenever I go, even if I am there early, most people don't get there until the end of the trailers anyway. Like, no one's showing up at the actual start time. At least in South Florida, that's how it is. But yeah, that's a problem.
It's frustrating for me when I go to the theaters too, because, like, I see it. I understand, like, the distributors are struggling. Obviously, like, they're struggling to make ends meet because they got rent to pay, they got bills to pay, and all the kinds of things like that, so they can keep their doors open. Like, my theater here, it was like I can't remember if was it this year or I don't even remember when, because, like, Gerald was asking about, like, looking for co-hosts for 2Ps and stuff like that. And I said, hell yeah, throw me in the ring. Like, I hadn't done Epic Film Guys for a few years. I do love movies. I miss reviewing movies. I miss talking about movies. And so I was like, let me do that. But then, like, it was only a couple months after I joined the Ps, I get a notice that this Regal is, like, one of the Regals that's going to get shuttered due to bankruptcy because the corporation filed for bankruptcy and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, like, they, for some reason, this one's still open. They decided to keep it open instead. They didn't close it. And then, like, but I get it from a perspective of, like, they're trying to capture whatever revenue they can. So they increase the amount of ad sales to get more revenue that way. But it's like, to me, it's counterproductive when you're looking at an audience that's already stressed with financial economic woes like you talked about. And then you've got like, the cost, like the financial cost, and everything like that of going to the theater and everything else like that. And then I really feel like, and it's going to sound weird to say it this way, because I don't think it's intentional, but I think it's almost to some audience members, to some people in the theaters, it's probably like almost an all-out assault. Not only do you want more money for tickets and concessions, but you also want more of my time to sit in a movie theater and watch all these trailers and all these ads and stuff to get to the movie. And a lot of times it's with locations like with My Regal, it's like this. I know, like, you could be on your phone the whole time. You could probably have a full hour-long phone conversations in that theater and nobody'd ever say a word to you or stop you. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, nobody, like, and you have your theaters that have that premium experience where they throw people out if they're on their phones or if they're talking and things like that, like an Alamo Drafthouse or whatever. But that's not how most of us live. Like, that most of us don't have that option, unfortunately. We got to deal with, there's a bright phone down 3 rows to the corner, and we keep seeing this bright light flash up over there and all that kind of different stuff. So I really feel like, and for me, I'll be honest, like, I love movies, like, how much I love films, but there's stuff I've skipped. There's stuff I've skipped where I'm just like, you know what? I'll get it on streaming in a couple of months, and we're not reviewing it for the show. So Gerald's not, over me with the whip and chain to get out to the theater and stuff. It's like, you know what? Like, I can wait for this one, I can wait for this one.
Yeah, I understand that feeling. I've become victim of that as well. And admittedly, part of that is being a father.
Like, you got that. With the young kid especially. Yeah.
Yeah. I love being with my kids. So I come home and I spend every moment with them that I can. So, when I'm doing this or when I'm at the theater, it's post 9 o'clock. So, and I have become a little bit more selective with what I'm watching, and it is admittedly a little easier to see things when they come out on streaming or on VOD, and it's a little rental. Especially this time of year, if it's not urgent, if it's not something that I have to see for review as you're talking about, or I don't like it, like my top 10 of the year is coming up and I have to make sure I get as much in as I can.
Yeah.
If I'm not under that kind of duress, I've become a lot more picky in my old age than I did 5-10 years ago, so, I like the convenient factor. I have absolutely, become a part of as well. It does help me out, but I do try to get to the theater as much as possible. I want that experience every time if I can. But I do have to balance that out with the rest of my life. So, and I'm someone that loves to do this, that, even if I wasn't doing an in-session film, I would try to see as many of these as I can anyway. I want to go to the theater and do this. And you balance the other side of that, to the general audience, if you will, that isn't actively seeking out a lot of these films.
Yeah.
And then you throw in all these factors and it's like, well, no wonder people aren't going to the movies as much these days. Their attention is all over the place, and it feels like there's all these hurdles that are keeping them from going to the theaters.
Yeah.
As we're talking about. And it is unfortunate. And I think maybe what's most heartbreaking to me in all of this, like the last couple of years, I have argued that the best thing that Hollywood could do is just make good movies. There's been a little volatility from the studio system, especially. The indie artful studios is a little bit of a different can of worms. But when we're talking about box office and tentpole films, or, the movies that will sustain Hollywood, I've always argued just make good movies. And of course, there's been some back and forth with that. But I think this year, maybe even going back to last year a little bit, I think we're starting to see that might not even be a factor at all. Now, I think it still is a little bit with something like Dune. I want to go back to even Barbenheimer last year or Top Gun Maverick. those were all good movies, and I think that was a part of it. But for reasons we've already talked about, I feel like there were other things at play that drew those movies to their successes. We've seen so many other movies that I would absolutely argue are good, sometimes great and excellent, and that's not really a draw. And like, people want to see good movies, of course, but I think the convenient factor, the pricing, the economics of it, everything we've been talking about, I think is starting to lean way heavier on the scale than quality.
Yeah.
And that honestly kind of depresses me a little bit, if I'm being honest. But who knows? Maybe that'll change. Maybe in another 6 months, I'll look at this and find this conversation silly.
What if every other film for the rest of the year makes like $1.5 billion at the box office, JD?
I would love that.
And we're full of shit right now.
Yeah, I would love for this conversation to be futile in the next few months. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, and that really, really would be great too, because we've got, you've got A Quiet Place. Both of the other ones were successful. They're both well loved. So, and I mean, you've got Lupita Nyong'o, who is phenomenal, driving this one. So I'm really hoping, and Dan even mentioned it over there in the chat. It's totally possible this is an exception. I think Brad mentioned it somewhere earlier in the chat, even bringing up Blade Runner 49 too. With talking about Furiosa, like, I even made the argument on Twitter, like, Furiosa is very niche, like Mad Max Fury Road, which I consider a masterpiece and like which a lot of people really adore. Yeah, it wasn't like some movie that blew the doors off the box office and made like $2 billion or anything like that.
And that's a really great point that has been a little lost in the conversation, at least around Furiosa, because Fury Road in its opening weekend only did 42.
Yeah.
Which is higher for sure. But I don't know, when you consider all of these factors and its post-pandemic and all of that stuff, for it to do, I think 32 was the U.S. international or the U.S. domestic numbers, I believe. That kind of tracks a little bit. Like I can see that, but Fury Road only did 45, and then ultimately went on to do 153 in the States and 379 globally. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep hope with Furiosa that it can get there, but also it's such a different movie. Like Furiosa, it's almost hard to recommend to people. Like Fury Road is an action spectacle at its core, but fuses these incredibly beautiful moments of poeticism throughout. Furiosa is the other side of that coin. It is a parable at its core that fuses moments of action throughout. So it doesn't quite have the same spectacle on the whole. I mean, when it's there, it is there. I think George Miller still brings his A game in that regard, but I mean, it's a parable first and foremost. And I can see why that doesn't work for everybody. I loved that, but ultimately, if Furiosa doesn't reach those Fury Road numbers, I can kind of understand why, even though I still think it's great.
I think like no matter what happens, and I mean, I definitely have a lot of issues with Furiosa. I was so disappointed when I walked out of the theater from watching that movie. But I think the most disappointing thing, regardless, no matter if you loved it or if you didn't like it, is with how dismal the box office is for that. Like, I mean, you think about a movie like Fury Road or even a movie like Furiosa, like the amount of practical effects work and the amount of stunt training and all that kind of different stuff. The budget needs to be kind of, when you talk about movies, there's a phrase that you can say, like, you see it on the screen, you see the money on the screen. And I think that Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa are both excellent examples of that. Like, there's not a dollar wasted in those budgets. Like, you can absolutely see
I agree, where
every penny of those comes from. So I think the disappointing thing in the end, no matter love Furiosa, hate Furiosa or whatever, is Furiosa bombing out as badly as it has likely means, I mean, especially with Miller being 79 years old.
Yeah.
Is this the last time we're going to get to play in that sandbox? I mean, and that's a sort of literal phrase for Mad Max, but is that the last time we're going to get to play in that sandbox? Which either way, like, I think that's heartbreaking if that's the case.
I agree. Now, I will say this, though. We live in a world where IP runs the day, runs everything, right? It rules the day. I think that we'll see more in this franchise because it is a built-in franchise. There's 5 movies in total. People, there's still a massive reverence for Mad Max Fury Road. Furiosa, we'll see how it turns out. Even if the box office numbers aren't there, it's still possible that over time Furiosa gains a significant fan base. I think we're going to see more movies. Now, to your point, is this the last time George Miller is directing those movies? Perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that's possible. I think maybe the next one will come from a different filmmaker.
Yeah.
Which will feel weird. Like there's something that feels so, I don't know. Like just, I feel like no one else should be making those movies, but knowing the business, I can't imagine that we won't see anything, even if it comes from someone else. I mean, he is 79 after all. I mean, hopefully he wants to keep making more, but it's a little bit of that, like if the trajectory of Furiosa goes to where it is and it loses money, I just can't fathom they're going to greenlight another one of these. But, at the same time, Villeneuve bombed on, Blade Runner 2049. And then they gave him, although that was, as the pandemic was going. So that's a little bit of a different context.
Right. Yeah.
They still gave him a bunch of money to make Dune.
Yeah.
Which I find hilarious. So like, if there's any hope to be had, it's that those things can still happen.
Yeah.
And, maybe we'll get another one. No.
Hold on. Did somebody say Furiosa? I heard Furiosa.
I told you if you say it too many times, he's going to show up. This is actually perfect because I gotta go to the bathroom so bad, and I'm gonna jump away really quick.
Bye.
While Gerald gushes
JD.
hard.
How's it going?
Yeah. What's up, brother?
Hey, how's it going?
I was listening in. I agree wholeheartedly with a ton of what you said. Oh man, the state of cinema right now has got me depressed. So I wanted to shift real quick. Favorite movies of 2024 so far, because Nick was talking about Furiosa, and before that's my number one. That one and Dune Part 2 right now are like neck and neck for me. And I'd love to hear what the chat has to say too. But what are you digging so far this year, man?
So it's funny that you asked that because at the end of our Furiosa review on our podcast, Brendan had said something to that effect. Like, this is my favorite film of the year. And
about Furiosa?
About Furiosa.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I haven't done that exercise. And usually about this time, like as we get to June, you see everyone's like top 10 movies of the year so far kind of thing.
Right.
I haven't done any ranking whatsoever. Like I've done zero preparation for that. But like I will say this, Dune Part 2, Furiosa very much in that conversation.
Yeah.
Another one for me is Monkey Man. I loved Monkey Man.
That's a good one.
I loved the artistry of that. Like, I kind of love it for the same reasons I love Furiosa, in the sense that there's kind of this parable ethos to it, and the artistry behind that I love. And then it has action that I think is incredibly well choreographed. It's
for a first-time director too. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of loved the artistry of that movie. So Monkey Man is up there for me. The other one is I Saw the TV Glow. I don't know if you guys
I haven't seen it yet. It just started playing locally to me, but it's only like one theater that's like a half hour away. So I'll probably, we're talking about streaming. I'll probably have to catch that on streaming.
Yeah, which is understandable for sure.
I got Civil War in my top 5. How'd you feel about Garland's Civil War?
I'm very mixed on Civil War.
Yeah. I feel like it kind of elicits that kind of reaction in general.
Yeah, like I'm mixed in the I guess conventional sense of that word. Like I feel like that film and the conversation around it has been quite polarized, and there's been some extreme comments on both ends of that spectrum, which is look, understandable. And if you love it, I want you to love it. But I'm very much like down the middle. There's aspects I love, other aspects that I do question. So it's one that I'm constantly wrestling with. But
some other ones I wanted to ask you about that I'm looking at my letterbox ranking because I'm trying to keep up with it as the year goes along. Sure. Unlike you,
I know. I gotta do that. I gotta do that exercise.
I know Nick mentioned Challengers. I love that one. I've got Love Lies Bleeding and Immaculate in my top 10 right now. A little film called Last Stop in Yuma County. Did you get to see that one?
No, that's on my list. I haven't seen that one yet, but that's on my list.
Any of those kind of stand out to you? Am I doing good there?
Yeah, I mean, I like Challengers is another one where I liked it. I didn't love it, but I very much did enjoy the film. Love the filmmaking behind it, of course. I have some questions about how the characters kind of weave in and out of that film. I think there's some contradictions in it that I don't always love. And also, like, this isn't really a criticism, but I think one of the funnier takeaways for me is that going into the film, you hear everyone talk about its provocation and its eroticism.
Sure.
I think that's a film where Guadagnino pulls his punches. Like, I think that's a film that could have leaned further into its eroticism, but he doesn't.
It was marketed. Yeah,
which I found interesting. Like, I thought that was, like, the artistic approach there, I love. From an execution standpoint, I think it would have alleviated some of the concerns or the reservations I do have of that film if he did lean into it a little bit more. But I do love the idea. I just don't know if the execution is always there for me. But
is there any other way Luca could have shot tennis? Or did he cover all
of that is
different
great.
areas? That's everything he could have done, right? Yeah. What about Immaculate? I got to know what you thought about the last 30 minutes of Immaculate.
So that's another one I'm a little mixed on. I liked it, didn't love it, and
oh man,
I think it's a little too ambitious for what it's able to do. I think Sydney Sweeney is great. I think The First Omen is a much better version of that movie.
Okay.
I love The First Omen. Honestly, again, if I'm thinking of a top 5 of the year on the fly, The First Omen might be in that conversation.
Oh, nice. I know you're not like a super, you don't gravitate towards horror a lot too, so that's cool.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I liked them. I liked them both. There was just, I don't know, something about Immaculate. That last act just really floored me. Like, I just didn't, because it was before all the kind of viral stuff about it.
There's no doubt about that. It is unforgettable.
But Nick, while you were in the restroom, what we figured out, because I know you were concerned about this because we recorded our episode a couple days ago, JD. It just came out today. So Nick, the mystery is gone now. What JD and I have discovered, and he even brought in Brendan's comments on it. Furiosa is the best movie of the year. So I know you were worried about that. So as we're sitting here now, it's the best of 2024. So you could rest easy tonight.
It wouldn't be the best movie of the year if it was the only movie I'd seen this year.
Oh man, JD, I love you, brother. I just wanted to pop in and say hey, love InSession, and
I mean, you're welcome to hang out, Gerald. You don't have to run away.
Yeah, I'll hang out. Yeah, I just don't want to take over, but I'll hang out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think the only thing, here's what I want to say about Furiosa with JD here.
Oh God.
Just because Gerald's already heard me vamp about this movie. It's 2.5 hours. What I feel like happened. Where's my little notepad I had? I feel like it was somebody. It almost feels like it was written by like a Mad Max Fury Road superfan who was like, where did the organic mechanic come from? Where did all of these different things we saw in Fury Road come from? It's like 2.5 hours of answers to questions we didn't need answers to. And then it commits the cardinal sin in film for me, which is what I call the live by night syndrome, where it just has a narrator talking about cool shit that happened and not showing us cool shit that happened, like the 40-day wasteland war or whatever. I'm like, don't even mention it. I don't even need to hear about it.
Well, all right. So here's my pushback to that. And some of this circles back to what I said earlier. I think part of like what makes Furiosa great to me is that at its core, it is a parable. And with that, there's going to be lingering ambiguity. So there isn't necessarily going to be a concrete answer on the outward, away from Furiosa, this is how this played out. And that includes the 40-Day War. Like, if she's not involved in it, and it has nothing to do with the central parable, which it doesn't, it's not going to be included. I love that he skipped over that. I think that would have been a detriment to the way that film was structured. And as it relates to the idea of answering questions from Fury Road, I do empathize with that. I don't wholly disagree with that notion. The film very much expands on lore and elements of Fury Road that you can insinuate just by watching Fury Road alone. Friend. However, I don't think the film really goes out of its way to give us too much of that, though. Like, the what is still very much up in the air. Like, how Gastown came together, like, what is the story there? Like, the film still doesn't give us any of those answers. The culture of the War Boys, like, how does that work? Doesn't give us any answers to that either. Like, there's still, like, it shows us a little bit more, but the historical of how all of this came together is the same as Fury Road. So, like, while I understand that criticism, I don't put a lot of weight on it because I don't think George Miller really goes out of his way to take us down a rabbit hole that is detrimental to Furiosa's story. And not even just her story, but the way it's been structured through this religious prism, which I thought was fascinating.
What I'll say too, and it's just us ganging up on Nick now, but that's fine. I like doing that. But what I'll say too is I think I gave this movie a 10 out of 10, which the only other movie I gave to this year was Dune Part 2. I watched Fury Road.
Oh, sorry. I felt a little something in there. Sorry.
I watched Fury Road like a day after seeing Furiosa, and watching those movies back to back, Furiosa is actually better. Like, they complement each other so well. And I think those two movies would play as this grand 4-hour epic. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to doing that when it's available. I agree.
Not like,
and just the nuance that was put into that because prequels. I mean, you're just trying to capitalize on the IP usually. You're just trying to make a few extra bucks and get super fans out to the theater. But a lot of thought and effort and dedication and love was put into the story by Miller to. It truly feels like the part of Fury Road that was kind of missing for me. And I know people love Fury Road, and I do too. But I think
Fury Road is a masterpiece. I do slightly prefer it still. But you are right. I love how complementary they are because they're kind of the reverse engine of what the other is, and it makes them very different in that regard. Honestly, they're almost kind of hard to compare because fundamentally they do approach the storytelling a little bit different. And like, I'm not the first one to bring this up, but it did remind me a lot of the Kill Bill movies in that regard. Like, Volume 2 is much more emotional at its core. It's more subtle. It has much less action in it. And I think that's a complementary piece to Volume 1. And I feel the same way about these two movies. Like, like
I'm glad it's way different. Like that, it's so much different than Fury Road. And here's the thing: like, if you're Miller, you're sitting down to pen the Furiosa prequel. You don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like, you already know that you're never you're not going to top Fury Road. Like, you're just not going to. So I appreciate. Calm down, Gerald. I appreciate him going in that different direction that he took. Like, I really, really do. I wish it worked better for me. I watched, because I hadn't watched Fury Road in a few years, and I rented it on VOD like the day before I went to see Furiosa, just because I really wanted to live in that again. And I legitimately sat there transfixed the whole time. In awe. Like, I couldn't believe, like, I already loved it. I already was calling it a masterpiece beforehand, and just watching it again, like, the thing, especially Theron's performance, especially in that film, I think is so masterful. It's so beautiful. And I mean, like, there's really great things about Furiosa. Like, I can't take everything away from it. Hemsworth is great. Anya Taylor-Joy is great. Oh, yeah. Visual effects, the action sequences are phenomenal.
And don't forget about your favorite part, the organic mechanic.
The organic mechanic. Really, I'm so glad I
really
know
enjoyed that.
I know I harp on that.
0.5% of the movie.
I pick on that.
0.5% of the movie.
I pick on that, but to me, it highlights the needlessness that I found kind of sewn throughout that script of, we didn't need this. No one cared about this at all. Miller did.
I mean, I think, honestly, the thing with Furiosa, and I think it speaks to why execution matters, because that fundamental idea that you're talking about there, it does make Furiosa on the whole completely futile. Like, there's nothing that we see in the film that you can't insinuate based off of what we know in Fury Road. Like, there really is nothing except maybe Jack, because I don't believe he's mentioned at all in Fury Road. So, like, that's a completely new character. But, like, everything else, you can use your imagination and fill in the gaps. And that's what's great about Fury Road. That's why it is a masterpiece. George Miller gives us everything we need without giving us hardly anything. Like, it's just all there on the screen. There's no exposition to explain anything. You're able to easily put everything together. And because of what we find out about Furiosa in Fury Road, there's not much that plays out here that we don't already know. But in execution, I find its poeticism ravishing. I love the biblical and religious subtext of the film, how that comes through visually. And again, we're talking about a character named Mary, a very carefully chosen name, sacrificing herself execution style, very Christ-like, and you get a visual of the crucifixion in the child's eye. There is absolutely nothing subtle about it, but I do find the visual symbolism extraordinary. Like, and that's the kind of filmmaking you get throughout the film as it relates to its biblical undertones. And I love how that plays out. There is a beauty to it that I assumed would be there in some way based off Furio, but I didn't expect it to be what it actually was. So even though I learned very little about Furiosa's backstory, I still found the journey to be completely entrancing.
JD, we got to actually.
You just said was right.
You quiet. You quiet.
Nailed it. Did you write all that down there?
Before you run away from us, we're running up on the end of the segment here. Before you go away, let me just say, as somebody who loves film, you're not going to find somebody who is better at analysis and things like that. I always feel like I know so much more about movies after I talk to you, which is why I love talking to you. But like the analysis, the care and thought and everything, and it's not just you. It's Brendan. It's the '80s champ himself, Jay Ledbetter. It's Ryan. Like, it's everybody in InSession that really just goes above and beyond and puts so much work and thought into film analysis and to making what film analysis should be, in my opinion. So if you're not somebody out there who already listens to InSession or watches InSession now that they've got video, please do so. But let the audience know where they can find InSession out there on the web.
Yeah, I really appreciate those kind words. We do put a lot of work into making the conversations what they are. So the fact that it comes across, it does mean a lot. So I do appreciate those words there. The easiest way to find us is InSessionFilm.com. There we have links to everything, but yeah, you can find us on YouTube now. If you just search InSession Film, you'll find our channel there. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, anywhere you can find it audibly. So you can subscribe to us there, or just simply listen on the website at InSessionFilm.com. But yeah, we have a main show we put out weekly, and depending on the week, we'll have 1, 2, 3 review episodes. that will live separately. So again, if you just want to listen to our Furiosa episode, you can do that without having to shuffle through a bunch of other stuff. So we've hopefully made it a little bit easier to digest in that regard. And we also have a bunch of great written content as well I want to throw out there. We have an awesome editor-in-chief at our website, Dave Giannini, who I love and adore. And he does some really great work in getting some written content. We had a writer over at the Cannes Film Festival, Hector, who killed it. It was absolutely fabulous. A bunch of great work from the films over there, if anyone wants to go and read that. But generally, from week to week, we have a bunch of great written content as well. So, InSessionFilm.com. That's the central hub. So, and thanks again for having me. I always love doing this. I had a ton of fun once again.
You got to come back.
Yep.
We're doing the drafts. We clubbed winners in an alley and we stole the fantasy movie drafts from them. So we're going to bring you. We're going to bring you back, and have you do a fantasy movie draft with us, JD.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Again,
Appreciate
you will
it.
never ever find better than JD and InSession Film when it comes to film analysis. Thank you so much for being here, JD.
You're welcome.
Thanks, JD. Love you, brother.
Yep. Love you too. Good night, guys.